Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Grid Encore. I'm Ben Schneider, joined, as always, by Brandon Crossland. Brandon, how are you doing tonight on another Motor Monday here at the Grid Network?
Yeah, it's a wonderful Motor Monday. Hey, way to beat me to it this time. And late August. Hope you're all doing well out there watching Grid Encore with us tonight. We've got an action-packed show for you and some quick-fire topics as well.
That's right. Busy weekend for us here at the Grid Network. Of course, our own Joe Samniego and Jackson Lambros did a fantastic job at Portland this weekend with their coverage. Make sure you go check that out. Jackson really enjoyed the grid walk that you guys posted last night. That's on our YouTube channel now, and got some great interviews, including Dario Franchitti, giving some insight as a former driver on what his driver, Ganassi Alex Palou, in that same number 10 car is going through now, trying to hold on to a championship fight and not let drivers do what Franchitti did a couple of times to Will Power, and that's overcome a championship deficit late in the season. So some good insight there and great coverage from them of track. Great photos up on our website now. Go check those out as well. And if you want that to be a more common occurrence here at the Grid Network, one way you can help us out is by joining our Patreon. And thank you again, as always, to Colin, Michelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew for your support on weekends like this more than ever. This is when your support goes the longest way for us. And it's what allows Joe to get out to Portland and get us that coverage along with Jackson. And like I said, if you want that to be a more regular occurrence, not just at Joe's home track in his backyard at Portland International Raceway, if you like what you see tonight, if you like what you've seen this weekend, you can consider joining them on the Patreon, or if you'd rather make a one-time investment instead, if you're watching on YouTube, we have the super chats enabled. Those would be much appreciated and thanked, and we'll read your comments, of course, as well as everybody's comments in the chat room. So please share your thoughts and opinions on this weekend's races and the topics we discussed tonight. We also have the Buy Me a Coffee link in the description box below as well. Now, Brandon, we do have some breaking news that came on just a couple of hours before we came on the air here regarding Austin Dillon, and of course, his final appeal for the Richmond penalty that rendered his playoff eligibility null and will force him into a must-win situation in the regular season finale at Darlington this weekend, because that final appeal has been denied. So Dillon's still looking for a victory that will make him playoff eligible. He doesn't expose the system in that regard, being a driver down in the high 20s, low 30s in points that would make the playoff grid throw it completely into disarray, so to speak, with a driver that low leapfrogging everybody in the standings. But one driver who did that this weekend was Harrison Burton for the Wood brothers, and the final full-time driver in points, 34th, was Harrison Burton entering that Daytona race. But he got the win, and he does not have to worry about the top 30 rule anymore. So he has a playoff spot. He's now guaranteed a top 16 finish in the point standings because his car did pass inspection, and he earned the win fair and square. I don't want to hear anybody talking about the double yellow line. He got hit in the rear by Kyle Busch as he was making a defensive move to win the race. Totally fair and square in my judgment. I'm so thankful that the yellow line did not come back to bite him, because I think that would have been one of the worst calls in NASCAR history if they would have called that. So thankful that the car that actually crossed the finish line first won the race. What a revolutionary concept here at Daytona for Harrison Burton here. Apologies to all the Regan Smith fans and Matt DiBenedetto fans and fans that maybe have some more painful memories from that yellow line. But Brandon, I want to give you the opportunity, because I know there were a lot of talking points that came out of this Daytona weekend. Of course, you had Lee Diffie coming into the NASCAR and NBC booth as well. That, I think, was a very popular move among a lot of the fan base. What were your thoughts on what we saw Saturday night for the Coke Zero Sugar 400? And what are your thoughts on Harrison Burton making it into the playoffs now, despite being the lowest ranked full-time driver in points? Is this another example of exposing the system? What do you think?
Yeah, I just want to start with completely agreeing with you about the double yellow line rule. Thank goodness. We could have been having a much different conversation all throughout today. So I'm glad that didn't come to bite Harrison. And also, I think back to also 2019 Justin Haley at this summer race. I believe that's where that also
18 Xfinity. He won the 19 Cup race, but that's another great example. He should have won that race, and he certainly got his revenge the next summer in that Spire car in the Cup race. But which again, top 30 rule would have come into effect. I know Haley wasn't running for points, but Spire certainly was on the owner side of things, and they didn't get into the playoffs because of that win. Now that rule no longer exists anymore. But that's another great example of it.
Yeah, and this is probably my second year in a row bringing up that stat, and you had to correct me the same way last year that it was 2018. My brain keeps thinking 2019. I'll get it eventually.
I don't even remember that. We can go back and check the tape afterwards, but you're all
That's
good.
good. All good. Yeah, Harrison Burton getting the 100th win for the Wood brothers. It's been since 2017, Pocono with Ryan Blaney, and it took multiple drivers to do it too. You think about the Matt DiBenedetto era, and then we're still in the
Paul Menard.
Paul Menard era
Yeah.
too. Yeah, I mean, went through all of that, and that they and the Wood family having to go through that, aligned with Team Penske, and this also disproved something that I thought what was going on for a while, not being able to get a win at drafting tracks because they are that Penske aligned car, the single car. I mean, essentially with their team, a single car team, really hard to get drafting help unless you get some unlikely heroes. And those unlikely heroes for Harrison Burton was the 62 Beer Motorsports of Parker
Yeah.
Retzlaff. I mean, look at him go. Bow ties not really put together there in the end, not really, and some controversy behind that too, maybe going against team orders. But whatever it is, Parker Retzlaff, he put on a good performance as well, and was just as close to a win as well on the backstretch. Huge run on the outside, but Harrison Burton, super talented race car driver. I remember back in 2020, he was on the up and up with Xfinity. That was really his last big year, and then coming in here into the Cup Series with the Wood brothers. Of course, that ride is not going to be his next year. It's going to be with Josh Berry. So unsure of where he's going to go, but this certainly does help getting the win. And I'm also glad that we had a green flag finish at Daytona. You know, even though it goes into extra innings, we get our green flag finish, and we don't have to look back at the tape and go through the scoring loop and see where everyone actually finished. I'm glad we don't have any of that mess, and that the double yellow line didn't play a factor as well. Another thing was the exit of Rick Allen, the entrance of Lee Diffie for the rest of this year. That was a really great improvement. Now, that's nothing against Rick Allen, but I think it was just time for someone else to give that spot at NBC a try. I'm glad they decided to do that. Lee Diffie is such a seasoned professional, and we talked about it before the show. It came out of Paris with the Olympics, and also all these other disciplines of not only motorsports but other sports that he has to be so invested in and so familiar with it that it's like he's been around it for years. Well, he's able to step into Daytona, a place he knows very well with the Rolex 24, and comes in and just knows all of these drivers like the back of his hand, and called it like he's been there since day one. It was absolutely fantastic, and it was a refresher to me to be able to hear someone articulate particulars. I don't really know how to put my finger on it, but someone really articulating more than just last names and getting the advantage and momentum coming from somewhere. These catchphrases, you know, that we like to say and are easy to say in the moment. I'm sure. I mean, I'm victim of that, and play by play I've done before. My fall on phrases, and I go back and I hate it whenever I do stuff like that. I want to be more specific. Well, Lee Diffie is a professional, and he knows how to get those specifics out, and it made a really entertaining race, whether you like how it was or not.
Yeah, totally agree. And again, like you mentioned, Lee Diffie, an absolute pro. And like I mentioned on yesterday's wrap-up show, you know, to come from something completely different, not even a month ago at the Paris Olympics doing track and field. And that's not the only thing he's done for NBC Sports on the Olympic side of things. He did rowing at the Rio Games. He's done bobsled and skeleton and luge at the Winter Games before. I think he even called golf for Network 10 when he was in Australia. I mean, he's done NBC's rugby coverage before as well, and of course, virtually every major motorsports series that you can think of. Virtually every major motorsport race. I think really the only one still left on his box is probably the Daytona 500, and might be a little hard for him to check that one off with Fox having the rights to that race once again here in a new TV deal. But he's called a cup race at Daytona now. He can at least say that. I mean, he can do it all, and I think people sometimes if they're not in the media landscape might not realize. I know I certainly didn't until I took a couple of classes and started doing. I mean, even what we're doing right now. I mean, there's a lot of homework that goes into this. You have to be presentable and know what you're talking about, and then when you couple that with going into the booth and calling the action on the fly, you have to know it like the back of your hand, like you just mentioned, and he certainly does. And I know we were talking before we came on the air here, to even have Parker Retzlaff's name. No disrespect to him or to Beard Motorsports, but that's a part-time team and only runs a couple races a year. It was only Retzlaff's second ever start, and he could set up Retzlaff's story just as well as he could set up Harrison Burton's, just as well as he was setting up Kyle Busch's before Burton passed him with help from Retzlaff on the backstretch. I mean, it was just fantastic to hear him back in the booth, and I wish him nothing but the best. I hope he sticks with NBC through this upcoming deal over the next 7 years and well beyond that. Whatever he's doing, whatever he's calling, I will absolutely listen to it. And I want to say again as well, I cannot emphasize enough how happy I am for Harrison Burton and the Wood brothers. And Brandon, to your point as well, this was their first win since Ryan Blaney in 2017 at Pocono, which was their first win since Trevor Bayne at the Daytona 500 in 2011. Which was their first win since Elliott Sadler at Bristol in 2001.
Wow.
Which was their first points win since Morgan Shepherd at Atlanta in 1993. So for all the history, all the race wins, I mean, 100 of them that you can count for the Wood brothers, they have not had a ton of success in the last 3 decades or so. And we'll throw Michael Waltrip's 1996 All-Star race Winston victory in there as well.
As you should.
For good measure. But, you look past a few victories here and there every half decade or decade or so. The Wood brothers just have not in the modern era had as much success as they enjoyed at the start of the modern era, certainly with David Pearson and several others that have won races for them. So I've never really understood that, to be honest, because I don't think, they've had particularly bad drivers behind the wheel, and I don't think the car has been incapable of getting the job done. It's just been circumstances. I know they had to cut down to part-time, around 2008 and the end of the 2000s with the economy and everything. A lot of teams had to close their doors entirely. We're thankful that the Wood brothers didn't have to do that, but and people forget, they came into, the charter era not having a charter because they weren't a full-time team. They had at least a charter for a year or two, if I recall correctly, with when Blaney was still driving for them. And, obviously they have the Penske Alliance now. And again, Paul Menard, to his credit, had, I think, a pole position and a couple of strong runs here or there, but never quite got close to victory lane. DiBenedetto got close a couple of times. But then Harrison Burton, I think probably in hindsight, moved up to Cup a year or two too quickly. I know, Brandon, you mentioned his 2020 Xfinity season really set the world on fire there with multiple race wins. 2021 wasn't quite as strong, but a lot of people thought, maybe he's ready to make the jump. Everybody's going to be a rookie in a sense with a next-gen car. And, the performance just has not been there for that 21 team. And we'll see what Harrison does next year. I think a lot of people are suggesting maybe a return to Xfinity to compete for a championship, or maybe even the Truck Series. Going down the John Hunter Nemechek road, I think, would hardly be the worst thing for his career. But let's let him have this moment and let the Wood brothers have this moment as well. Let them celebrate. It is an incredible feel-good story. Having said that, like I mentioned on Encore last night, the team is 34th in points. And I don't know. There's just, I think it can be both. I mean, I feel like a broken record because I sometimes describe myself as a radical centrist, not to get too political here, but I do have very strong feelings on very important topics. Don't get me wrong, but I can at least 99% of the time, as strong as I may feel about something, whether it's, as important as, your morals or whatever the case may be, or whatever, or as unimportant in the grand scheme of things as, how NASCAR determines its champions, I can at least understand where the opposition is coming from. There are very few issues where I don't at least see both sides of the argument or multiple sides of the argument and can believe two things at the same time. And right here I do. Harrison Burton's win was absolutely fantastic and a great story. And we love to see that. We'd love to see an underdog win a Cup Series race at Daytona, no doubt. But you can also look at how it affects the championship fight and the playoff grid and everything and say, well, I don't know. I don't feel like that car has been running strong enough to merit taking one of those 16 spots away from somebody else who's significantly higher up in points, who has significantly more top 5s or top 10s this year, who maybe hasn't won a race yet, but is on the outside looking in just because of circumstances here. I don't know. I feel like, in Daniel Trotta, who I am a fan of, who I like, who I think does a great job for SiriusXM, tweeted, it seems like a self-contradiction here or something along those lines. I don't have the exact tweet pulled up here. I can see if I can pull it up here so I'm not misquoting her. And I thought I could just go to reply here and
keep rolling.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't understand why it has to be one or the other here. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think that there's a sizable amount of the fan base out there that is happy for Harrison Burton winning this race on an individual level, but also, looking at how it affects the playoff grid and saying, what are we doing here? This is the lowest ranked car. Yeah, and I have a tweet now as well. But Brandon, I think you know which one I'm talking about. If you want to take it.
It was 3 hours ago as of this live recording. The head scratcher for today's on-track show. Fans loved Harrison Burton and Wood Brothers win, but don't like the playoff system. Upside down smiley face. Seems kind of contradictory. Close quote.
Yeah. Okay. So I said contradictory. I almost basically had the gist of it here. I didn't want to totally misquote her. So I appreciate you finding the tweet for me, Brandon, because for some reason my X.com feed wasn't loading as quickly as I expected it to. But yeah, I mean, I think that's with all due respect, my head scratcher would be why that's a head scratcher, because I don't think that those are two contradicting opinions there. I think you can look at this and that should be what the top storyline is. And this is another reason I think why I'm not a fan of this system, and admittedly sometimes feel like NBC's coverage is a little too playoff heavy. And this time of year, I guess that's inevitable, but
that's why they want this half of the year.
Well, that's certainly a good
argument.
Exactly
why they pay the big bucks for the championship part of the year. I mean, Harrison Burton winning the Coke Zero Sugar 400 is your main headline. The Wood Brothers snapping their winless streak, 100 wins, is your headline. Harrison Burton making the playoffs is not your headline. Is it important? Yeah, I don't think it's the biggest thing, because we all kind of know that's a if you're a betting person, that's one of the very long shot of actually going anywhere.
Yeah, and again, I agree with you that it is not the headline. It shouldn't be the headline, but I also think it's impossible to ignore. And I had I saw some responses, some people, not even responses, people saying, look, I hate the system as much as the next guy even, but let's put these complaints aside for tonight and let's just let the Wood Brothers enjoy their win, let Harrison enjoy the win. And I said, well, hold on a second here. But this is a system that constantly gets talked about this time of year. Who's in, who's out, who's above the cut line, who's advancing to the next round, who has the longest odds to do this or that and the other. I mean, we can't just have this win in your in system in a year where we've removed the top 30 rule and ignore the elephant in the room that, oh, wow, he's going to finish at least 16th in points now. And like I said last night, when I look at the standings, and again, it's not even, I think some people sometimes get this aspect of it lost in the whole debate. It's not even solely about how we crown our champion. It's like, I think Kyle Busch was like 13th, 14th in points last year, in a year where he won 3 races and was certainly performing better than he has been this year. I would feel like he's probably about a 7th or 8th place in the standings kind of driver in 2023. But, he had a couple of bad rounds in the playoffs, and that was enough to drop him, probably half dozen positions in the standings lower than he should have been. But then you take Harrison Burton here, and he's going to finish. And again, this is no disrespect. He went out and earned a race victory. And that should be the headline. That's a great moment for him. But it shouldn't be enough on its own to lift him 18 spots higher in championship points. I don't feel like that's too controversial of an opinion there.
What was it supposed to do then?
Well, I guess I guess
in this format, Ben, what is it
I guess
supposed to do?
that's probably what the counter is. This is the era that we're in now, and winning gets you into the playoffs, and that's all that matters. Unless this win had come at Talladega in the fall after the playoffs had already began, and then he
Then
still
it means nothing.
then he still finishes 30-something in points. It's the fact that this win happened 2 months earlier, before the playoffs, that's gonna lock him in. But again, I said, and again, I don't love making stick and ball sports comparisons, but people that defend the playoffs bring up the 2007 Patriots and the 2016 Warriors all the time. So I think that's fair game for me to ask if the 2-15, apologies, Kobe, Carolina Panthers defeated the 14-3 Kansas City Chiefs.
It's okay. He knows they're bad.
Yeah, I know. I'm just apologies that's the team that I have to use the example for. But if the Panthers beat the Chiefs in Week 18, they wouldn't be playing Week 18 because they're not division rivals. But whatever, if they beat a 14-3 team the last week of the regular season, they get in the playoffs. Should that alone? I mean, they had this major upset victory in what is still ostensibly the regular season finale in many respects for a lot of these teams to try to get into the playoffs, and they won. So hey, 2-15 Panthers, take the 7 seed, take one of the 14 playoff spots. But Houston Astros with a 31-29 record or whatever it was in 2020. Go! You're going to the ALCS because we're expanding the playoffs. I mean, I don't know. I just think that with our friend Jackson's comment there, it's another good example. It's just I don't think you can ignore that. It is absurd to think about the lowest ranked driver and team in points full time with one driver, again, because I know there's rotation of drivers for a couple of those cars, but are they a top 16 team in Cup this year? I don't think very many people are arguing they are. That's not a knock against them. It doesn't mean that they can't go out and on their best day win a race. More power to them. But should that alone guarantee them a playoff berth and a 16th place points result? I just don't think it should.
I mean, this is one of those complicated topics. Like, maybe it shouldn't, but is your concern more about Harrison Burton getting into the round of 16 and being the 16th driver when it's all said and done? Or is it like on the scale, is it more in concern for Harrison Burton being a lost cause when he gets to the round of 16? Or is it more for those other drivers of what could have been and they end up winning the next week and it doesn't matter, like Bubba or Ross or Kyle Busch?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's both. I think it can be, Harrison probably shouldn't be that high in the final standings, but also, and again, people would probably say it doesn't really matter who the 16 seed is or whatever, because they're not going to win championship anyway. I don't expect, with how they've been running all year, Ross Chastain or Bubba Wallace or Kyle Busch or any of these bubble drivers to go on deep championship runs. But, we talked about Austin Dillon at the start of this segment. His playoff appeal was denied because he won a race and he probably should have won that Richmond race on speed. Kyle Busch was close to winning this race on speed here at Daytona. I mean, I think RCR might be finding that speed once again here these last couple of weeks. Kyle Busch had a great run in Michigan too. I think they're turning a corner. I think Kyle Busch, being the veteran champion that he is exponentially more likely to, if not even win a championship, at least make a run to the round of 8, at least make things interesting if he squeaks into the playoffs than Harrison Burton is. And by the way, I would be all for Harrison Burton and the Wood brothers going out and proving me wrong and making a run to the round of 8 themselves. I think that would just add on to the incredible underdog story, and more power to them if they can do that. But when you come into the Daytona race only having, I think his best finish this year was, I think he tied it at Michigan, best finish on a non-super speedway drafting track. He was 11th at Atlanta, 10th at Talladega. It was 14th at Michigan. That was his best non-drafting finish this year. I don't expect that car to be able to make a turnaround that quickly, even with how much of a momentum boost this is going to be, to do anything of note in the playoffs. And when that's the case, I'm sorry. I kind of view it as a wasted spot.
I mean, like that's the way it works. It works the same for Harrison Burton as it would for Bubba Wallace or anyone there that won last night. would be the exact same Saturday night. It'd be the exact same outcome. And I get what you're trying to say.
Sure, but then why? Yeah, and again, I actually agree with what Charlie Crawl said on Twitter this week. I don't know for sure. I don't want to speak for Charlie. I assume, knowing Charlie's other opinions on the sport, but Charlie probably is a playoffs defender. I don't want to say that definitively. I haven't stalked his Twitter account that much here, but I don't want to speak out of turn. But I do agree with what he tweeted in that, look, this is a feature of the system. This isn't a bug. They literally took that rule away to make something like this possible. But then I don't know. Like, I think the reason that rule was in place was to prevent Spire Motorsports from messing up the Owners' Championship when Justin Haley won that summer Daytona race. It was to prevent Chris Buescher, who ultimately did squeak into the top 30, but Front Row Motorsports, even in 2016, even though they had won that Talladega race with David Reagan, David Gilliland, that 1-2 finish, like they were on their way up, but they weren't, the occasional contenders even that they are today. Chris Buescher was, a Cup Series rookie. He just won an Xfinity Series championship, but he wasn't going to do anything of note with that team and that equipment at that point in his career in the playoffs. I think there's, and he got the job done. He finished in the top 30, did what he needed to do. But that's why that rule was in place. If you can't even do that, then why do you belong in the top 16? I don't think you do. And I'm not going to apologize for that opinion, because I think you can have that opinion while also being incredibly happy for Harrison Burton and the Wood brothers, because it is a great story.
Yeah, I'm just going back through the comments here on Daniel Trotta's original post that we just read earlier. As we read, Joe, I wonder if the RTA wanted the top 30 rule removed. They advocate for the teams and have disagreed with NASCAR. Removing the rule helped the RTA teams.
Yeah, I mean that's a good theory. I don't know, necessarily if there's any truth to that. There very well might be, but again, that's, and I'm sure that's part of the negotiations going right now with the charter system. Because I think the RTA, the owners coming together, I think they have a lot more power than people might realize, and maybe that's part of it too. If it's winning in, who cares if you're outside the top 30? You should be winning in for everybody who's eligible. And by the way, when you're already going to the top 30 and there's only 34 full-time drivers in the series, like when you're going that low, you might as well just, I think, have a winning year in for everybody. I think I like what Colby Evans has said on Twitter this week as well. I think that if anything, it should probably be a top 25, or maybe even what the old original wild card used to be from 2011 to 2013, which would be top 20. You can be a multi-time winner, 11th through 20th in points, and you'll get one of those final to chase for cup spots. Because I think if you can't even be top 20 in a straight up points battle, the chances of you making much noise in the playoffs, I think, are probably slim to none. So
there's a couple thoughts here from one of the commenters here, Steve. Just because fans like to see the 34th place car win a race doesn't mean fans think the 34th place car should be in the playoffs. If the 0-14 Vikings beat the 11-3 Packers late in the season, they still have no business being in the playoffs. Exactly. And then Wood Brothers Racing commented, respectfully here, honestly, I think a scenario where you could arguably be mad over the team/driver winning and the playoff implications is if we had if we had a hand in the rule being made. We just did what we try to do every week, and it happened.
And that was from
Wood Brothers Racing? Official Wood Brothers Racing an hour ago.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, I see it now. That's a direct reply to Danielle's tweet there. Daniel Trotta, I should say. Yeah, I mean, I get it, and again, it's nothing against. I want to make that as abundantly clear as I can. It is nothing against Harrison Burton. It is nothing against the Wood brothers. I mean, because you have people out there that are like, oh, anybody not named Kevin Harvick winning the championship in 2020 is totally undeserving. That's not me. Ryan Blaney winning the championship last year when he would have been 6th or 7th in a straight up battle. That's not. I'm not one of those people. Every driver, every team has the same rules to play by, and the ones that maximize their opportunities and got to the championship 4 and then performed on that day, you are a deserving champion. You're not going to hear that from me saying, take their.
We're not keeping our own Winston Cup points around
Yeah.
here. We play by what you play by.
Yeah, and I even agree with what Mike Bagley said last year. I think it's fun to look at. It's fun to tally up. It's fun to play a fantasy game and all sorts, but it is kind of a waste of time because if you didn't,
it is.
With Ross Chastain ride the Martinsville Wall in a regular season championship points format.
There's Absolutely. No chance that they'd ever race that way, the way they're racing now, if it was a full point season.
So that move alone, you move him back, whatever it was, 4 or 5 spots, and then you move everybody else up 1 spot. And that's just one example of an infinite number of, the racing and the results would be different. So you can, it can give you an idea. And when Harvick is as dominant as he is in 2020, I think you can maybe say a little more definitively he probably would have been the champion. Corey Heim in trucks last year was the same way, but you can't say for sure. We have the system we have now. You guys are deserving champions, and Harrison Burton is deserving of getting into the playoffs because he did what he had to do with the system that he was given and everybody else was given. And Kyle Busch hasn't done that yet this year. Ross Chastain, Bubba Wallace, they haven't done that yet this year. It's not their fault, but it's a reality. And we are already half an hour into the show. And again, Brandon, I know we were joking backstage. It's probably going to be a shorter show tonight because it's been very busy for us here at Grid. And like I predicted, we ended up going on a bit of a tangent here with this open segment. But there are a lot of layers to this, and I think it's important to hit all of them and discuss all of them, and some good points raised from our friends Jackson and Joe in the chat as well. And you guys, hopefully, if you both are still watching here, thank you again for your excellent coverage of Portland this weekend. Certainly making us proud here at the Grid Network, and hope to see you going to Portland for many years to come and expanding our coverage here in the future, trying to build this outlet up here. So Brandon, any final thoughts on this, and then we can move on to our Xfinity recap here.
Yeah, I think it's time to put this one to bed.
Sounds good. Well, let's pull up the Xfinity results for everybody then. And really a family affair all around this weekend. Harrison Burton winning the Cup race with his dad, Jeff Burton, in the booth. And all sorts of connections there with the Wood brothers and the Jarrett family. Jason Jarrett was Harrison Burton's spotter. I think that's kind of gotten lost in all of this. And Dale Jarrett being on NBC, surely having the memories of Ned Jarrett calling his win. It's just an incredible full circle moment for the Burtons and the Jarretts. And how about the Truexes as well? A second generation driver, Ryan Truex, picking up his second win of the year for Joe Gibbs Racing, his third in the last 2 years here. Ryan Truex, much like Harrison Burton, said in his post-race interview, he does not know what his plans are going to be in 2025. When you look at what he's done with the limited opportunities that he's had in the Xfinity Series with Joe Gibbs Racing here this season, do you think he's earned a full-time ride somewhere in 2025, whether or not that's with Joe Gibbs in the Xfinity car or elsewhere in the top 3 series?
Yeah, I don't know, and I don't think he knows yet, but I hope someone makes that decision for him here real soon, because he said it himself that he thinks the only other driver that's part-time to win as many races as he has or getting close to it is Ty Gibbs. Would be the last one to do that, and here he is in the Gibbs car in the Cup Series. So yeah, absolutely. And we said this for his last win when he doubled down with Dover 2 years in a row. We said this is deserving of not just passing by. Like this could potentially lead to a 2025 full-time Xfinity ride going for the championship. And I think he would be a good contender as well. So yeah, this is exactly what Ryan Truex needed to advance his career and not to stay on a part-time basis. And he's wanting to get back to the full-time stuff, and this is the right move towards that.
Yeah, at this point in his career, I don't know that a Cup Series opportunity is going to open up, at least not with the top team. I know he did almost a full season with a full regular season, I guess, with BK Racing in 2014, which again, certainly not comparable to what his brother Martin Truex Jr. is driving with Gibbs Cup equipment. But, at this point, for Ryan Truex, I'm sure he would be more than happy to go chase an Xfinity championship or a truck championship again. And, had some strong runs with Hattori back in the day as well. Nice Motorsports a little bit more recently than that. So, regardless of whether or not he could win a championship or, prove that he belongs in Cup Series conversations at this point in career, or, all that aside, I think at the very least, winning, what is this now? I think only his 8th start of the season, and He's got 2 wins to show for it. He's got a 25% win rate right now. I mean, that says to me that he should be knocking on the door of any full-time opportunities that are opening up in this series. And again, we'll see what happens with Gibbs in 2025. We know they're going through a shakeup on the Cup side of things, of course, with Martin Truex Jr. Stepping away from full-time racing. I don't know what their Xfinity program is going to look like necessarily next year, but I think if they have an opening for a full-time seat here, and if there are some sponsors on board looking for somebody that can get them to victory lane, I think Ryan Truex is your guy for sure.
It'd be good to see, and some sponsors to go along with him too. He's basically the Toyota kind of sponsored car when he does do the part time. So maybe he can get some different accounts on the bill too.
Yeah, for sure. And then you had Chandler Smith in the second position there. Parker Kligerman ends up third. He and AJ Allmendinger were working together in the draft all night. Allmendinger got spun off the bumper of Kligerman on the last lap. Kligerman certainly had no ill intentions there. That's just the nature of super speedway racing when it gets down to the last lap. Allmendinger ended up 24th. He got spun going into the first corner, the first turn, and ended up coming back up across the banking. I think a caution certainly justifiable, but I think Brandon, and this will kind of lead into our second open discussion here for the night. I think a lot of fans were really kind of upset and consider that a buzzkill ending here. Going through overtime finishes and seeing the product that we see so often on super speedway races nowadays, and not even getting a green flag finish to show for it because the drivers can't seem to run 2 clean laps here at the end of the race. I know they mostly did that. I know a couple cars spun out at the end of the Cup race on Saturday night here, but what do you think of the current state of super speedway racing here across the board in all 3 series? Do you find it as enjoyable as you used to maybe 10 or 15 years ago, or does it feel like now that we can't get a finish in regulation, we're seeing more of these accidents here? I told a friend the other night that it's gone from will we get the big one to when will we get the big one to how many big ones will we get? It just feels like it's kind of spiraled out of control here. What's your take on that?
It's such a divisive topic, Ben, but I do feel like with overtime existing, that drivers feel like they have more liberty to be aggressive, and because they know that there's a possibility of a second chance. Don't you think so? I mean,
Yeah.
if you knew it was only one and done, we're finishing under yellow, it's over with. It's going to go the scheduled distance, and that's it. Then you're gonna mind your P's and Q's. You're not gonna take risky moves, but you're gonna do within the bounds of I'm going to finish across the line. I have to make it to the line. I also want to win. There's not going to be a redo on this. There's not going to be some extra laps. And I'm not an expert, but I think that might be the reason why we had so many green flag finishes back in the day, because there was no, you weren't going to get any more. They knew that was it, and so call that what you want. But I think when you didn't give them the possibility of more laps to come where they can try again, they were a little more behaved.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think that, when drivers, again, I think we've seen this kind of with the safety aspect as well, maybe not the last couple of years with the next gen concerns, but I think, you started to see this at the turn of the decade, probably the mid to late 2010s here. And maybe stage racing has played a part in that, playoff points and the importance of those. I don't know. But I think that when you have drivers who, recognize that if something happens here, we will at least get a do-over, like you mentioned, and now we have unlimited attempts everywhere. We went from you're only going to get 1 attempt to you're going to get up to 3 attempts to you have to get to the overtime line, but otherwise you can get unlimited attempts. Now bring the overtime line back up in a second because somebody made a proposal that was interesting to me this weekend as well. But now it's you got to complete a full lap, and if you don't, we can try this. We can be here all night if you want. And again, I feel like that we saw at the Daytona 500 this year. I think a lot of people felt like that was a buzzkill. When drivers know that we can re-rack them and give everybody a second chance or a third chance or a 5th chance, as we saw at Nashville, which isn't a super speedway, but it's a mentality that's present all throughout the series, all throughout the year now. I think that's maybe one of the unintended consequences of having unlimited overtimes.
Yeah, I think you're right there.
Yeah, and
And I haven't. I'll be honest, I haven't really enjoyed it that much. Whenever, I really am hoping that we get to a green flag finish, and when it's not, it's like, oh, here we go again. And I'm right there with those that you've been talking to. It's how many of those how many of them are we going to have this time? How many is it going to take? And I go back to the Cup Series just for a moment. Man, the we had one overtime there, but man, the amount of carnage was again a problem with me. I know we're always going to have it, but just from Michael McDowell to Josh Berry on his lid and crashing into the safer barrier. I mean, something's got to be done about that bottom of the race car. I know that's a different topic, but um, yeah, just it's chaos.
yeah, there's no doubt there. But again, I'm just drawing it back to the overtime line. One of the things, and again, forgive me, whoever tweeted this, I didn't bookmark the tweet. I only saw it in passing, but somebody said the overtime line essentially was the right idea on the wrong lap. And what this user meant by that was if we get a caution like what happened with Allmendinger on the last lap, maybe of course, you have to throw the caution immediately when the drivers coming back up into traffic or when we have a car, upside down like we have with Kyle Sieg in last week's Xfinity race in Michigan. But maybe there's a line on the backstretch that they can race to, and then they can get slowed down and, have enough time to get woed up before they come across to end the race, and then everybody's slowed down under caution and can safely maneuver around whatever incident happened there. It's an interesting idea. I feel like it's probably better in theory or on paper than it would actually be executed, but it does kind of feel like, and I don't blame fans for feeling that way. Fewer and fewer of these races are ending at their scheduled distance. I mean, ending at their scheduled distance under green is practically unheard of for a super speedway race these days. It's incredible.
That's just data right there. That's not someone just generalizing. That's actual data. We don't get scheduled finish distances like we used to.
Yeah. Yep. And I think there's fans have every right to be upset about that. Once again, I understand the pro overtime argument. Believe me, it is certainly a buzzkill when races end under caution. I don't think they would end under caution as much as they do these days, or as much as we go into overtime these days, if we had never introduced the system in the first place. Because again, there's an entire generation of drivers now. I mean, everybody talked about Harrison Burton being the first Cup winner born in the 2000s. I mean, you could have had Parker Retzlaff. He was born in 2003. And I mean, he had a shot to win that race there at the end. And overtime was introduced in 2004. So in Parker Retzlaff's entire lifetime, when I say in his entire lifetime, I guess he was 1 year old when NASCAR overtime was introduced across each of the top three series. So his basically his entire lifetime, he hasn't known a world different here. So you've got an entire generation of drivers now that are coming up that literally do not know anything different. And I think that in a lot of ways, you can talk about drivers being young and immature all you want, but I think it's kind of ingrained in you at that point that this is how we race now, and this is how it's always been for me, at least. So what's wrong with that? Let's see what our friend Jackson says here. I think half of the playoff complaints would go away if stage racing and overtime vanished again. Yeah, I mean, they're all. I know people don't like the word gimmicks here, but I think that is a pretty good word for the umbrella of it's all under the same umbrella here of gimmicks. I think all these things here: playoffs, stage racing, overtime. Those are probably the top three. You can maybe throw a yellow line rule in there as well, because I mean, goodness knows that's caused no shortage of controversy over the years too. But I don't know. I do think you look at the current state of super speedway racing. I think regardless of what you think the solution is, if you think there even is a solution, it's understandable why fans might be feeling pretty frustrated these days. All right, so Brandon, if you have anything else to add to that, we'll let you wrap it up here. Otherwise, we can move on to our truck recap in Milwaukee.
Yeah, congratulations to Ryan Truex. Let's move on to Milwaukee.
Sounds good. All right, let's bring the Truck Series results up here. And again, like I mentioned, family affair all around this weekend. Lane Riggs played playoff spoiler here. Of course, we all expected some big things from the second generation driver, the son of Scott Riggs this year in his full-time, his rookie full-time Truck Series season rather, with Front Row Motorsports in that 38 truck. It has not, however, been the season that he was hoping for. But recently he's ended up, he's accumulated rather several top 5 finishes, but he's been kind of up and down is what I was trying to say there, with a lot of DNFs, but a lot of top 5s bouncing around the running order here. But he's ended up with a race win this weekend, Brandon, in fairly dominant fashion as well. Are you surprised, given the season that he's had, that right here in the opening race of the Truck Series playoffs, he was able to play spoiler here and take this victory?
Very surprised, and it's just like one race too late. Like we were talking about the possibility for some of these other drivers in Cup here in a couple of weeks. Man, what a terrible start to his Front Row Motorsports career with the Truck Series this year. I mean, so much promise, and then not being able to deliver, and then as soon as it doesn't matter anymore, put on a clinic at the Milwaukee Mile, which I saw. Yeah, I mean, absolute domination there from one of the oldest racetracks in the country, and really need to see him get it done. I'm glad his shoulder is okay. he celebrated a little too hard, and I don't think I've ever heard someone celebrate so hard that they dislocated their shoulder. But he says apparently it happens. So like it's something that's happened before. So glad he's okay there, and it didn't happen during the race, and it was after it was over with. But yeah, cool to see him finally get that chip off his shoulder. Unfortunately, it doesn't actually count towards the championship, though.
Yeah, although I will say this in fairness to him, he's had enough strong runs. They've kind of been outweighed by the finishes down in the 20s and even the 30s as well. But he is 12th in points at the moment, which is basically, I guess everybody else is racing for 11th if you don't end up making the top 10 and making it into the playoff field here. So certainly it as bad as it's been, or as up and down as it's been for Lane Riggs, I guess you can make the argument it could have been a worse season. He could have had, some even less consistency than he's had here over the last several races. But last 3 finishes, a pair of fifths at IRP and at Richmond, and now a win at Milwaukee. And unfortunately, it sounds like, again, another piece of news that we got today, it sounds like the trucks are not going to be back at Milwaukee in 2025, which I think is unfortunate given the history of that track. But for Lane Riggs to give a Truck Series a send-off like that, feels like they just came back, and now unfortunately it's not going to be on the schedule next year. But
yeah, I was about to say that. I was afraid it was something that I was told that wasn't supposed to be said, and so I tried to turn it around. But okay, it is public. Okay,
there were. I don't know if it's been officially confirmed yet, but there were a couple of outlets that were rumoring it yesterday, and I think it's been picked up by some more substantial outlets here today. So okay. I think it's essentially all but confirmed at this point.
Forgot where my source came from.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because, again, like you mentioned, Brandon, there's so much history there, the track, and I think it's a shame that the Truck Series sounds like they couldn't come to a deal. It sounded like to me, NASCAR wanted to be there, but the track wanted them to be there just for whatever reason. I think there's been some sort of breakdown in negotiations with the city, or funding, or whatever the case may be there. But it's unfortunate it's not going to work out. But could this victory, Brandon, as a quick follow-up here for Lane Riggs, could it make his season work out a little bit better here? Could Lane Riggs be the best of the rest by the end of the year? Do you think he's finally turned the corner, had some consistency here, 3 top 5 finishes in a row? Can he finish out the year with some strong momentum and hopefully carry that over to 2025 and being more consistent next season?
He absolutely could. He got Bristol coming up. That's another short track for you. And we haven't seen him at Bristol yet. Yes, we have. Never mind. Scratch that. Take it back. Short tracks. You got Bristol coming up, and then Martinsville in November. And then you got the lottery race at Talladega. So plenty of other chances for him to keep some positive swing going. He's getting those top 5s and then the win. So it could also translate into next season as well. So yeah, I definitely think he could.
All right, we'll leave it there. One final note on this. I want to read a comment we got from the very beginning. Someone named Nicholas in our chat room. I guess is Lane Riggs' cousin here. So thank you for tuning into our show here tonight. My cousin Lane Riggs won, and I was rooting for him the whole time. I'm so proud of him. He finally did it. Let's go. But he also just put in our chat room here, Lane should be careful when he's celebrating. Hope he doesn't hurt his shoulder next time here. But shout out to the Front Row Motorsports truck team and their pit crew here. It sounded like, or at least, or looked like from the celebration that they worked on his shoulder for a few seconds and were able to pop it back into place and then started celebrating again. So I guess, they just pop the socket back in there or whatever the case may be. But it seemed like it was, fortunately, all things considered, a minor injury in his celebration. But
he seemed kind of unfazed by it. He's like, yeah, it happens.
Yeah. So hopefully he learned from that. And, if he wins a couple more races at the end of this season or next season, wherever he's racing, hopefully it's just a one-time occurrence here or it doesn't happen again. So hopefully he learned something from that. But congratulations to Lane Riggs. Been a long time coming for him this year. And not the only driver celebrating a win at Milwaukee. Stop me if you heard this one before, Brandon. The 18 and 28 cars finished 1-2 in the ARCA Menards Series.
Quit. This is what we expected, isn't it?
There's not too much.
Surprised.
Yeah, not too much more to say here. Congratulations, I guess, to LeVar Scott on getting the win in class of the ARCA full-timers here. But again, I don't know what the exact margin was. I think it was close to 30 seconds on the final lap. I think I saw it getting into 29s. I don't know, but it quite got to 30 seconds behind Sawalich there. But Sawalich wins. Zilich, I think, about 4 seconds back, if I recall correctly. And then you've got 30 seconds back to LeVar Scott. So, I mean,
Sawalich wins in GTP, LeVar Scott in the AR class. That's the ARC Irregulars.
I guess. We can joke about it, but I mean, it really is. And again, no disrespect to Sawalich or Zilich here, but again, I mean what I said last week as a compliment. I think they are, in a lot of ways, too good for this series here. I mean, it's just been absolutely unreal, these margins of victories, the amount of wins that they have racked up. And I suppose we should mention on a championship note, it was obviously a race for the main ARCA Menards Series, but it was also the penultimate race for the ARCA Menards Series East season. And of course, Sawalich and Zilich, unsurprisingly, have been fighting for that championship. They are the top two protagonists. Gio Ruggiero, unfortunately, a tough night for him. Again, all things considered, I'm sure there's some teams on this result sheet that would love to be in ninth place, but driving a Venturini car, unfortunately, his worst finish of the year that he has been running at the finish for, at least, with a ninth place run. So looks like he's going to be solidly third in the East Series Championship. Zilich still holds, doing quick math in my head here, I think a 17-point lead over Sawalich. It would be a razor-close championship battle, and I suppose that would at least give us something to look forward to at Bristol. But the problem for Sawalich was he finished 17th after DNFing at Dover. So that alone was pretty much enough to kill his championship hopes here, even though he hasn't finished outside of the top three the entire rest of the East Series season. Zilich has 4 wins to his 2 and hasn't finished worse than 4th in his 7 starts this year. So all Zilich really has to do when we get to Bristol in a few weeks is survive. And I'm sure we're going to get more than 17 cars entered in that race. So it is by no means a guarantee or a given that Zilich is going to hold on to win the East Series Championship over Sawalich. But should Zilich run into trouble at this race and fall out fairly early, Sawalich does what he needs to do, and there's no reason to doubt he wouldn't at least be in the top 3. He could potentially steal the championship from Zilich at the final race. So there is still a championship aspect here. And of course, it's going to be another combination race with the main ARCA Menards Series. So you at least have that to look forward to if you're an East Series fan, because unfortunately, I suppose, unless you're a William Sawalich or Connor Zilich fan here, the last several race weekends in ARCA hasn't been too much to sing praises about for your drivers in victory lane, at least, because it's been dominated by the same 2 drivers pretty much all year. Of course, Ruggiero got the win at Five Flags Speedway in Pensacola earlier this season at the season opener. But aside from that, it's been all Sawalich and Zilich in East this year, and really all throughout ARCA this year at the tracks that they've been eligible to run it. So again, we don't need to rehash the entire conversation that we had just last week here on this show. But congratulations to those two once again, certainly stomping the field at Milwaukee, and we'll see if they can do the same when it comes time for the East Series finale at Bristol in a few weeks.
Yeah, on for the good of the entire ARCA series, Menard series, it's time for Sawalich and Zilich to go ahead and scoot up the trucks, or wouldn't even be disappointed if they went straight to Xfinity. I mean, put them somewhere where they can actually compete with those that are on their playing field, please.
Yeah, well, you're going to see that, I think, with Connor Zilich in Junior Motorsports. So, I mean, again, I think that again, when you're dominating ARCA this much, I don't think I can blame you for taking the Ty Gibbs road, and maybe you can go straight from. That's what they used to call it, right? The ABCs, ARCA, Busch, and Cup. Now Busch is Xfinity. You didn't have to used to go through the Truck Series as a part of that ladder. So, we'll see what Zilich can do. And again, Sawalich the same way. I think he's on a similar path with Gibbs here. So we'll see. I wish him nothing but the best when they get to Xfinity, but it would be. I mean, I'm not advocating for this, but it would be nice if they could let a couple of other drivers, experience victory lane here before the season's done. Not saying that they intentionally back out of a throttle here. Of course, just joking in that regard. But you certainly, I would love to see LeVar Scott get to victory lane. If any series regular at this point, we're so far into the ARCA season here, and we've yet to see a full timer get to victory lane. I mean, that's had a whole impact on that championship as well. So it's a very interesting dynamic, and unfortunately, it's one that doesn't involve a lot of parity. All right. And finally tonight, let's take you through the Indy NXT results here real quick. And again, great job, Joe and Jackson, for your coverage of Portland this weekend. Got some great photos from Joe up on the website as well. Make sure you check those out. And their coverage of the entire weekend, including Indy NXT here. Jacob Abel taking the win, Louis Foster ending up second. Those are your top two in the championship, though not in that order. Foster holding on to the majority of his lead there. And with just a couple of races to go, I think it's a matter of when, not if, he clinches this championship. Bryce Aaron as well. Congratulations to him on another podium finish. And Kyle Collette recovering from that incident with Jamie Chadwick at the beginning of the Gateway race last week as well. Unfortunate for Chadwick ending up 14th. Not the greatest result for her. But we'll see how she can bounce back with a couple of ovals to close out the Indy next season as well. So that's our race recap for all the series we cover on this show. And that's going to be our show for tonight here after we get through our one shining moment. So, Brandon, what do you have for your one shining moment on this weekend of motorsports here?
I had to give it to Lane Riggs because it's just the most unexpected to me. It didn't think he would be able to pull out a win with Front Row Motorsports, and not saying that I didn't want him to. I mean, same case last year with Riley Herbst, where I said he's not going to win. Well, I didn't put those kind of curses on Lane Riggs at all this year, but he pulled through at Milwaukee and did what we knew he was already good at doing around South Boston. So congratulations to him in Front Row. Unfortunately, again, it's not for a playoff berth, but again, that's not the big story for me. So to sum up the whole night, that's not the biggest story. The big story is that he is a winner in the Craftsman Truck Series, and I think that's something on its own that can be celebrated. So way to go, and glad you got your shoulder back in its rightful place.
Well, I can tell you, if you had gone the full Riley Herbst path with your predictions this year, I don't think it would have put it past me to go find those clips again. And
it'd be another montage, I know.
Have some fun at your expense, unfortunately. So be thankful you didn't do that there. But in all seriousness, of course, congratulations to Lane Riggs. That is certainly a moment worthy of a one shining moment. And I'll give mine to the other NASCAR Top 3 Series winner this year, or this weekend, rather, Ryan Truex. Again, I think in a situation in his career that is a little bit unfortunate, although not for the same reasons as Lane Riggs. For Lane Riggs, it's been a lack of performance or lack of consistency this season. For Ryan Truex, it's lack of even opportunity to be full-time. But he certainly made the most of his opportunities with now his second win this season, and thoroughly deserved. I also want to give a shout-out to Wawa, being from just south of Philly. Wawa is near and dear to my heart. Appreciate seeing them invest so much into this Daytona weekend as the title sponsor of the race and as the sponsor on Kyle Weatherman's car, and Kyle Weatherman bringing home a top 10. I was hoping that maybe Weatherman could shock the world and maybe give us a Wawa race version diecast that I could add to my collection. But maybe next year. They seem to be fully committed to this series and this race, and that's been great to see. So shining moments of Wawa as well.
Wawa makes a good George Harrison song too, if you're unfamiliar.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for watching our show tonight and supporting us on weekends like this more than ever. Means the world to us. Be sure to subscribe to the Grid Network if you haven't already, and follow us on all our social media platforms. We're on X/Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitch, LinkedIn, Threads, and most importantly, right here on YouTube. Thank you all again so much for continuing to help us grow in our subscriber count and our analytics and our views all year long. And again, on weekends like this more than ever, we really appreciate it. If you want to see more coverage from the racetrack and make that a more regular thing here at the Grid Network going forward, you can take a few minutes after our show here and consider joining Colin DeShell, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew in our Patreon. They help keep us on the air throughout 2024 and beyond, and they also help us expand our coverage by getting us to the track. And if you want to see that on a more regular basis, like I said, you can consider visiting the link below to learn a little bit more about what we do here at Grid and consider joining them. Or if you'd rather make a one-time investment instead, you can visit the Buy Me a Coffee link in the description box below as well. Or you can use the Super Chat and Super Thanks option on YouTube. That's also an option for you. Now, on Wednesday, Kobe will be back. Kobe Lambeth with Grid Tonight. So make sure you stay tuned for that. And Joshua Birch and Matt White as well. Women in Motorsports will hopefully be back this week. So make sure you stay tuned for that sometime on Thursday or Friday. And then we'll do it all again here on the Grid Network with pre-race wrap-up and Encore to follow. Probably going to absorb the Cup Series again because we're headed to Darlington, and that is a Sunday night race. I doubt we'll be going on the air at 11 p.m. So make sure you stay tuned for Encore next week if you want your Cup Series recap. Brandon, any final thoughts before we sign off for the evening here?
Yeah, next weekend, go to one of my favorite places. The Cup weekend has a date with the Lady in Black, and everyone's going to earn their stripes. It's going to be a fun. I'm glad we're settling the regular season championship and also ending the last chance race is at a place like this where you really do have to earn it, and it's not a lottery anymore. I think that's the big win, and also I think it's a big win for you, Ben, that Austin Dillon didn't come back and make your worst nightmare by winning at Daytona. Want to get that out of the way too. So don't worry, it's all good.
If he had won at Daytona the way Harrison Burton won, I'd have no problem with that. If he had done what he did to win the 500 or even to win the summer race in 2022, or if he had gotten back in from this final appeal, probably wouldn't be so pleased with either of those circumstances either here. But
I'll close that can right here. But I just wanted to bring that up. Darlington is a lot of fun.
He did finish second in the Southern 500 in 2020. I'm just throwing that out there. We'll see.
All the more reason to watch, my friends.
Absolutely. I want to say for my final thoughts here,
go ahead.
Cody Ware in fourth place, that 15 car for Rick Ware Racing. Well done to them. Well done to Rick Ware. Justin Haley's been doing a great job all season. They've really taken a step forward. And would you believe Cody Ware now has more top 5 finishes at Daytona than 2021 Cup Series champion Kyle Larson?
Huh? That doesn't make sense.
I'll leave you to think about that for the next 167 hours here, and then we'll see you right back here for Encore next week to recap the Darlington weekend and much more. For Brandon Crossland, for Joe Samniego and Jackson Lambros on this weekend, I'm Ben Schneider. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time right here on the Grid Network.